Hello everyone. In this video, I would like to ask your attention for more or less 20 minutes because I'm going to show you one of the most amazing games of this year. And I would not be surprised if at the end of the year, I'm going to say this is actually the game of the year. It's played a few weeks before I launched this channel at the Romanian Championship. White in this game is a strong grandmaster rated 25 plus. It's Gergely Sabo, and he is playing against Nicodim-Cosmin, rated 2283. And well, you'll be treated here. So let's get ready to rumble. It's e4, c6. It's the Caro-Kann opening. d4, d5, and e5. The advanced variation, and well, the idea of black here is to get the bishop out to f5. White has a lot of different ways of handling this system, but the move h4 is one of the sharpest and most popular ways of handling this variation. So the main idea is that black normally would love to play the move e6. Pawns are nicely placed on light squares, the bishop is outside the chain, but here this move tactically fails to the move g4. And after bishop e4, you hit the bishop with the move f3 one more time, and after bishop g6, you go h5, and the bishop is trapped. This is a very well-known trap and should be avoided by black. And that explains why, in this case, black starts with the move h5 to prevent white from expanding with the move g4. White goes bishop d3. The bishops are getting swapped. This is all very standard. And now black goes queen a5. Check. Typical move. There are different ways of meeting this check, obviously. But later on, probably black is going to consider offering the exchange of queens. White goes knight e2, and now black goes e6. So from a positional perspective, the opening has gone well for black. He has managed to trade off its bad bishop. The bishop on e7 is a great piece, not being hindered by any of the other pieces, but there are still a few problems for black. Because normally, white is the one going to attack on the king side. And I believe that the insertion of the moves h4 and h5 is favoring white clearly. Why? First of all, the pawn on h5 can become a target. And secondly, the g5 square can be used as an outpost for a bishop or a knight. Remember my words, because the g5 square is going to play a vital role in the outcome of this game. White plays knight gf3. And black goes knight h6. Typical move. You can also play knight e7, but via h6, you're also on your way to f5, and this time you're not hindering the bishop. So white castles, and black goes knight f5. So very well-known position still. White has to decide how to proceed, and the main move here is to play the move knight b3, attacking the queen, and then the bishop can be developed to g5 very soon. But instead, Sabo played here the move c4. And I think c4 in this system, it's a very well-known idea, but normally you only play it when black has offered the exchange of queens with queen a6. To avoid the exchange of queens, you put your pawn on c4. But here, black hasn't been forced to play queen a6, so I believe we have, from a black's perspective, quite a good version of this variation. Black goes bishop e7. Attacking the pawn on h4, white goes g3 and black castles. And white goes b3 just to be ready to develop the bishop to b2. And now, very important idea, black would love to play here the move c5, but it's not good as it allows c takes d5 and you cannot recapture with a pawn as the knight on f5 is hanging. So therefore, black prepares that idea with the move rook d8. Excellent move, and I think objectively speaking, maybe black is even a bit better here. White played rook d1, perhaps in hindsight bishop b2 is objectively more flexible. You can still decide how you're going to arrange your rooks later on. And well, just to get the bishop involved makes a lot of sense. But instead rook d1 played, and now the move c5. Typical pawn break. In case of c takes d5, you're always ready to take back with the rook, maintaining the pressure down the d-file. And you see that white is actually not ready for this operation. D takes c5 played. And now interesting moment, as so often in these kind of positions with the tension in the center, There are different ways of playing. You can recapture instantly with a queen or with a bishop, but very often there's no rush. And if black would have played here knight c6 to connect its rooks, I think black has a fantastic position. Black can even think already of playing for an advantage, because I don't see how white is going to build up an attack and prove that the g5 square is vulnerable. Instead, there followed queen takes c5, which sets up a big threat of taking on g3, making use of the f2 pawn being pinned. But white goes knight f1. And still, I think black can consider a simple move like knight c6 with a very comfortable game. I don't like white's coordination. The queen is misplaced on the d file, the rooks are not connected yet, and all black's pieces, they are fine. The knights are nicely supported by its pawns, so no problems here whatsoever. But thanks to the following move, we get to see an amazing game. Black played here d takes c4. Very natural move, setting up a discovered attack on the queen, but also forcing white basically to sacrifice the queen. Queen takes d8. Bishop takes d8, rook takes d8. So white has a rook and the bishop for the queen. And after king h7, there are always these ideas to get a knight to g5 and launch an attack against the black king. That's going to be a very important factor. So white thought, okay, let's try to find a good way for the bishop to get involved. But he doesn't want to play bishop e3. The bishop could get swapped, and in the end you're still material down. Black also has ideas to go c3 perhaps at some point. I think bishop f4 is the best move in order to get the rooks connected very soon again. Still, black also has some problems to get the back rank developed. But instead, knight e3 was played. Very interesting move, but things are getting really, really sharp now. Black played the move queen a5, and you may think, was that really needed? Well, as I mentioned, still there are issues getting these pieces into play. And after queen a5, at least you're trying to challenge that rook on d8, and there are additional ideas of taking on b3, for instance, and white is unable to recapture. Sometimes queen c3 is an idea, and if white ever is going to move the knight, maybe queen e1 check. So it's a very multi-purpose move, but at the moment, black is basically playing only with its queen. Knight g5 played, check. So here we see the vulnerability of that g5 square, and black goes king g6, and now things are getting really, really joyful. Now, look, knight g2 was played, so white ignores that rook. If you do take the rook, it's going to be knight f4 check. The king got to go to h6, only square, and now knight takes f7, king h7, knight takes d8, white regains the queen and is a full piece up. So at the moment there is no time to take the rook on d8, but you should also realize that there is a huge threat of playing knight f4, and if the king goes to h6, there is a rook h8 with checkmate. So knight f4 is a big threat. What should black do? Well, moving the knight away from f5, it's the way to go here, so that after knight f4 check, there is king f5. So for instance, knight h6 is the best move. After knight f4, king f5, apparently there's no mate. It's a really chaotic position. Anything can probably still happen here, but black is doing fine. Instead, Stepanenko came up with a crazy idea, like he thought, I can move the knight away with gain of time. Let's capture that pawn on g3. Because if white would take that knight, now it's possible to take on d8. The rook is still hanging. Knight f4, king f5, there are no knight forks, black is winning. But instead, after knight takes g3, we are not going to take the knight on g3, we play knight f4 check. So, of course, if king h6, it's rook h8 with checkmate, as I've mentioned earlier, so the king goes to f5. And now, knight takes f7, capturing a very important pawn. And the idea is that you're protecting the rook on d8, but also the rook will come to f8 very soon, hoping to set up a discovered check against the black king. So what should black do? Well, it's a really chaotic position, difficult to have a clear view of what's happening now. But for instance, if you would give a check, there is just king g2, and there are still problems. The knight is hanging. And for instance, if you would give a check on h1, you can just take that knight, and after queen g1, the checks are over. The knight comes back, and in this case, you have a rook and 2 minor pieces for the queen, which is just great news for white. And if you instead would consider playing knight e4 with a huge threat of taking on f2, then the following sequence is fantastic. There's knight d6 check. And, well, one of the problems is that the king doesn't have good squares to go to. If you take on d6 the knight, it's a rook f8, for instance, and still the king is in big trouble. If you would go king e4, it's f3 check, and there are not many squares. If you go king d4, all of a sudden it's bishop b2, and here you see why the queen is so vulnerable on e1. It's a discovered check. White is winning material and the game. So therefore, Black decided not to put the queen on the first rank, but play the move queen c3 instead, attacking the rook on a1. And now, for instance, if you go rook b1, queen c2, rook a1, queen c3, we have a repetition of moves. That is definitely possible. But white is the higher rated player and wants more. Plays here, fantastic move. King g2, it's probably a move you would think, what the heck is happening here? But the point is that if you would take the rook, the bishop is not pinned. And the bishop is going to play a very important role in this line. Let me show you why. If knight d6 check, and you play something like king g4, it's going to be f3, king takes h4, and knight g6 with checkmate. That is one very beautiful line. And if you take with the king on e5, then knight takes c4. It's the key move. The king once again doesn't have many squares. If you go back to f6, for instance, it's rook f8. King got to go back to e7, and now knight to g6, protecting the rook, giving a check. King d7, knight g e5. Look at the fantastic coordination between white's pieces. The king has only 2 squares. If it goes to e7, it's bishop a3 with checkmate. Look at this beautiful pattern. Every square has been covered by a white piece. It's checkmate. And if you instead play king c7, well, we have rook f7 check, forcing the king to go backwards. Now it's knight d6, king d8, and another beautiful checkmating pattern of the rook and the 3 minor pieces all together. Absolutely stunning. And that's all because of that brilliant move king to g2. There are some other amazing lines as well, which had to be calculated. But Black didn't capture the rook on a1. Instead, played here the move knight e4, saving that knight. It's a very logical idea. But now, Black is not threatening anything at the moment, and White decides to play here the move rook f8. And these intentions are clear. You would like to move the knight away and set up a devastating threat. So once again, if you take the rook on a1, it's knight d6 check, king takes e5, knight takes c4. The king has to go to d4, and now it's bishop b2. And once again, you see the bishop is playing a very important role after queen takes, knight takes b2. Material at the moment is even. In fact, Black is a pawn up, but it's completely game over, because look at that back rank. The knight cannot move because the rook will be hanging, so you're totally stuck here. Technically winning position for White. So what should Black do? Well, that's a very difficult question. At least the engines are going to tell you what you have to do, and to find it over the board, it's really difficult, because probably you have to play something like knight to c6, ready to give up that rook in the corner. So the rook on a1 is also still hanging, of course. And well, the critical line is knight h6 check, double check. So both the rook and knight are giving check. The king can only take on e5, and now you go knight f7 back. And probably this is just leading to a repetition of moves. If you go king d4, then at least, well, you have something like bishop e3, and it's game over. Black is forced to give up the queen, and at the end the rook is still hanging as well. But instead, you go king f5, and after knight h6, it's a bizarre repetition of moves. But I don't think a human is gonna find it. Instead, Stepanenko thought the king is not safe on the f-file. Let's move it to g4. It's a very active move. And you see why the queen went to the third rank, so that you can either come to f3 or sometimes even h3. Well, not now because the knight is covering that square. But there are these counter checks possible thanks to the king. Thanks to the king and queen, of course. So what should white do here? Well, that's a big question. And in fact, the best move was not found in the game. But white has a forcing way to finish off the game. If he would have played knight h6, this would have been by far the best game of the year for sure. You have not many moves. If king takes h4, it's knight g6 with checkmate. The bishop covers the g5 square. If you take the knight on h6, then the brilliant move here, and this is so difficult to find, it's the move knight d3. You're interrupting along the third rank, so the queen is not helping in defense. Rook f4 is the big threat, and it's going to be checkmate. King takes h4 is the only move. And now rook f4 is no longer leading to mate. You have king to g5, and after a discovered check by the rook, let's say rook f3, the king runs away, and things are everything but clear. So this is something you shouldn't do. But after king takes h4, the key move is bishop takes h6. Fantastic silent move. Black doesn't have anything he can do against the threat of rook f4 with checkmate. None of his pieces are able to cover the square or interrupt somewhere on that file. Rook h1 is an additional threat. This is game over. Very spectacular way to finish off the game. But instead, white played the move bishop e3. Very understandable as well, because same idea, you're interrupting along the third rank. So there are no queen checks. And if you take on a1, you have f3 check. After king f5, you do play knight d6 check, double check, king takes e5 only move, and now beautiful checkmating pattern with the 3 minor pieces and the rook once again. So what should black do instead? Well, there are not many things you can do. You see that there are quite a number of threats, like f3 for instance, very difficult to meet. So therefore, knight takes f2 on the board, eliminating that very annoying pawn. And apparently, if you would just capture that knight, let's say king takes, you can take on a1, and all of a sudden the mating threats are gone. You're missing your f-pawn, and black always has counterplay with its own queen. Can give a bunch of checks. And also, second idea, if you play anything else, there could follow queen takes e3, and black may even take over. But once again, the next move, fantastic idea. It's the move knight d5. You're sacrificing that knight, attacking the queen, and if you do take it, we have knight h6 with a second knight sacrifice, threatening rook f4 with checkmate. King got a take on h4, rook f4 check, now knight to g4, rook h1, and after king g5, do you see the mating pattern? It's rook takes g4 with double check, and the king cannot go anywhere. It's checkmate once again. So that means with knight d5, you're threatening the queen, but also knight h6 is a big threat. Queen takes a1 was played, but now knight h6 was played anyway. If you take it, it's rook f4 with checkmate. So only move here for black is king takes h4. The line even continues here. We take first that annoying knight on f2, it's a piece, and there are no longer any queen h1 ideas. So the knight was kind of distracting white from carrying out this attack. So we take it, king to g5, and now bishop e3 back. If the king goes back to h4, it's rook f4, king g5, and rook g4. It's the same mating pattern as we have seen in the other line. Beautiful cooperation between all these 4 pieces again. So black played here the move king to g6, and now things are getting a little tricky, but white played very precisely. He played here the move knight e7 check, forcing the king to go to h7, and well, you got to continue here with the move knight f7. This is such a beautiful move. It's a silent move, but with such a big threat, threatening to give mate on h8. Whenever you give a check on the second rank, like queen takes a2 or queen b2, it's always king h3, and the checks are over thanks to the bishop once again standing along the third rank. Queen takes b3 doesn't come with check. And if you think, okay, I need to create an escape square for my king with the move g6, well, it's leading to mate by force. Knight g5, king h6, and now the simplest line is rook h8, king g7, rook g8 check, all forced, king h6, only move, and now rook takes g6, once again, checkmate. So many checkmating ideas in one game, something you don't see at the highest level that often. So rook h8 is a big threat. Black decided to play knight c6, which is in fact a very clever idea. The rook covers the h8 square, so rook h8 is not a threat, while if you take on a8, then black is going to take on e7 that knight, and now rook h8 is no longer mate as the king is about to escape. Don't do that. Instead of capturing the material, keep looking first at the checks. White played here the move knight g5, excellent move. After king h6, knight f7, king h7, knight g5, king h6, moves were repeated once, but then we have another beautiful discovered check, knight takes e6. Very important idea because we take away a very annoying pawn. I will show you very soon why exactly. Black has only two moves now. It's only a single check. If you play g5, you take with the bishop. The king cannot come to the g file, has to go to h7, but after rook f7 check, king h8, bishop f6, once again, checkmate. So black therefore played the move king h7, and now knight to g5, king h6, and the key move here, knight f5, which is not possible when the pawn would have still been on e6. That's why it was so important to capture that pawn first. King goes to g6, and now, very important, knight to h4, check. It's a forcing sequence of moves. King h6, knight f7, king h7, knight g5, king h6, repeating the moves once again to get to move 40, get additional time. White had finally more time to work out all the difficult lines. It's an incredibly complex position, even for strong grandmasters, to figure out all the subtleties of this line. But only now you can take the rook on a8. This is the way to go. There was no need to keep giving more checks. That would only lead to a repetition of moves. Now, after capturing the rook, you're threatening checkmate on h8. Once again, if you ever take on a2, we have king h3 and it's just game over. The checks are over in that case. Black played g6, and this is still the last tricky attempt. Giving a check now, it's not such a good thing to do because the king is about to escape and all of a sudden it's not that clear. But instead, we have this king already in sort of a cage, cannot really move anywhere. There is this move rook g8, threatening to take on g6. It's absolutely game over. There are two ways of defending against the threat. The checks are not helpful, so we got to protect the pawn. If you play queen b1, so that you're protecting the pawn on g6, the easiest way here is knight e4 with a discovered check. If you play g5, bishop takes g5, king h7, and now it's knight f6, once again, checkmate. Beautiful, beautiful play by white. And, well, if knight takes e5, which was played in the game, I give you one moment to think for yourself. Pause the video if you want. But we're almost at the end. It's the killer blow here and the coronation of one of the most amazing games of the year. There followed rook takes g6, black resigned. The point is that if you do take with a knight, it's knight f5 with checkmate. I cannot recall having seen such a mating pattern in recent times. It's just absolutely stunning how the white pieces were able to work together in this game. I hope you enjoyed this game, and please leave your comments in the chat below. I would welcome any of your thoughts. Maybe you don't like the game at all. You're also willing to share that with me, of course. No offense, but please, if you have any great games you would like to see covered, please let me know, and I will probably try to do my best to bring it up to the channel. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. See you soon again.